My big issue around agriculture is the gender inequalities that exist. Yeah. And this is what I've always worked around. A lot has changed, even in the narrative, you know. And now, when you talk with even governments, even the Kenya government, we are concerned about gender inequalities. This was not there before. So I think we've come a long way. We have a lot of very interesting tools, approaches. There's a lot of attention paid to making sure that when technology innovation is done, it pays attention to the needs, priorities, and constraints of women. So we've come a long way in that. We do need to continue to push it. We need to keep pushing it. We're not there, but we've made strides. I was a team leader for gender, and there were 2 team leaders. And what we do there is make sure that all the different divisions, when they do their work, they pay attention to gender. So sometimes that means when they write a proposal, we ask, where is the gender component in there? Sometimes it's strengthening their capacity. Sometimes it's developing new tools that they don't know about. And we train about that. And then other times it's pushing the organization so that the board can ask, where is the gender work of our, so providing that kind of evidence. When award came, I understand award really well because I've seen the kinds of impacts. So it's very exciting because suddenly this was a position that was going to pay me to do all the things I believe in. So the fellowship program is excellent and really we need it. But then we also need to look at the institutions. And this is something I'd learned how to work on, the policy dimension and the institution, the ARD. Recognizing that if you don't have all those 3 components together, you probably don't get the kind of impacts. So I came to award really with a lot of excitement. One of the things that you find is that policy reform and good policy actually have a chance to address the gender gap in agriculture. But for that to happen, policies must pay attention to gender. And if we are not careful, we end up with these very blanket policies that don't recognize the constraints, the priorities, the opportunities for women, and they can actually pull them back. So what we intend to do with the GRASP Fellowship is to identify women who are in policy and strengthen their leadership capacity. But beyond that, we want to also strengthen their skills in designing and implementing policies that are gender responsive. And our aim is to really create a critical mass of women policymakers who can lead policy reform processes in Africa. And of course, it's going to be in the same way that the award fellowships run. There will be the policy fellow, and she will identify a mentee, but they'll also identify a mentor, a fellow. Yes, they'll identify a mentor who is somebody more senior in policy processes who can also mentor them and walk through that. It's still quite new, so we are thinking, but we hope that we might be able to put together groups of fellows that work on, a Pan-African issue around policy, which we think will also be really important. What we recognize is there are different ways to look at policy. It can come through a private sector person, maybe concerned about the seed systems and the sale of seeds. It can also come through the NGO world, the civil society, because of their advocacy. And then, of course, there's a government. But don't forget that there's also the research dimension around policy. So it's completely open. It can be academia, it can be government, it can be private sector, civil society. We just think that it would be really good to look at policy in, the different dimensions. So depending on whichever one the fellow is working on, will enter through that one. Award works on three pillars. Yeah, we have the individual pillar where we're looking at fellows and leadership, etc. And then we have the institutional dimension where we're working with ARD institutions to make sure that they really integrate gender in their policies and their practice. Now, the third dimension is the enabling environment. So the GRASP allows us to finally really work on those issues. When you look at ARD institutions, just women, they are around 25% in Africa. Leadership, 7%. These statistics may be a bit dated, but I can tell you, coming from FAO, because FAO is a reflection of the ARD sector, the agriculture sector, those statistics are quite similar in FAO. So you know that the problem is still there. I think what I really like now is the push to have women in the sector and in leadership comes from everybody. What I think Award has done, and to tell you the truth, we have not documented it as well as we should. So this is going to be one of the things that I do, is really to go back and to see what is the impact of training charity, What has that meant in the ag sector? It's time that we document, for example, when we trained Maria Bukutsa went through Award. What does that mean for her? What has that meant for her institution? When we trained scientists, what has it meant for the technology innovations? Are they developing technology innovations that are reaching more women than men? So we really, it's time we look at that in one way or another. Now, there's a big push to work on what are called gender transformative approaches. And these are approaches where you're starting to interrogate the negative sociocultural norms that perpetuate inequality. The norms that say the man is not going to help take care of the children. Or the norms that mean that woman cannot go to sell her product in the market, with the mobility constraints. The norms that say that the inheritor is male. So now, it's actually a big deal. There's a lot of push to work to challenge these sociocultural norms and to change them. But you can't change one person and not the other. So there's a big push to work with men and women together. Men and women to understand that if the woman has gone to the market to sell the product, it's for the good of the family. So working with men to become champions of gender equality. And also working with boys so that you start to interrogate these issues when they are young as well. And actually now when you look in the agriculture sector, it is a big deal. They are talking about gender transformative approaches. FAO, the Rome-based agencies, so this is FAO, WFP, IFAD, they have a big program where they're talking about working on gender transformative approaches, changing mindsets of researchers as well as farmers. There's a big push, there's approaches that have been developed that you work with the family unit without disempowering the man, but empowering the woman as well. I always say that when you work in the international world, you are an African woman, you need to work 10 times harder.
Yes.
You will always find you have to create the space for yourself. You cannot be lazy. You cannot be lazy. In FAO, for every meeting I went for, I did not go to wing it. I had prepared what I needed to say because it needs to make sense so that they can say, oh, okay, Susan has a point. So you really must prepare yourself. Make sure that you create alliances or networks with other women who can reaffirm you. It's extremely important. I remember many moments where you're like, actually, maybe I wasn't that good. And then you call on these networks. Continue to do what you're doing. You actually have earned the right to be there. So leave the doubting people. And the other thing is really to do good work, to do good research work, to publish. My mother was one of those first group that goes to school, yeah? And for her, it was really important that we don't get married until we had gone to like graduate school. She didn't want to hear me talking about, getting married or dating seriously after my bachelor's degree. She was so discontent. And so she really pushed. She wanted her girls to go to school to get good jobs. So if they get married and they need to leave, that they're able to leave. I think this was, she was one of the initial feminists. So she really pushed me with that, yeah? Another very powerful woman. So you really need these people along your pathway, these amazing, good supervisors and mentors.